So I clicked on the link that you had in the article, and I was like, I thought maybe, oh, did it not go to the right link? And then I clicked it again. I was like, oh, no, this is what he wanted me to see.
It just caught you by surprise?
Yeah.
Or because the quote didn't seem to match it?
Oh, no, that's just, I wasn't, it's not what I was expecting. Like, I wasn't sure how it tied in with the topic. I haven't read the article.
You haven't, you say?
I did not read the article yet.
That's all right. You don't have to. That one question is the only one that isn't focused on what you would expect to hear Harrison Ford being interviewed about. I mean, it was kind of funny to read through it, and then you have the one question that's a diversion where the reporter's trying to get something about his personality and all. Yeah, so there's a theme that runs through his responses. And have you watched anything of Shrinking, the Apple TV
I've
series?
watched the trailers, and I'm waiting for all the episodes to be available before starting it, but that's on my list. That's high up on my list to watch.
We've watched a couple of episodes now. We're slowly making progress. So the question that was funny, this kind of gives the theme. Your shrinking character, Paul, is, I would imagine, closer to how you are in real life than your other roles. He's low-key, smart, affable, but also sometimes grumpy. Would that be fair? And Harrison Ford's response is, I don't have Parkinson's like Paul, or a deep knowledge of therapy, and I'm not in business with a couple of fucking maniacs. But I recognize that maybe he's like me, or maybe he's not like me. And that's acting. And that last bit, maybe he's like me, maybe he's not like me, and that's acting, that's a theme where you really get, and he follows it up right after that. So the reporter says, so whether he is or isn't is not something you'd want me to know. And Ford's response, you've hit on the first rule of acting club. Don't talk about acting.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
And that's a consistent theme through all of his responses. And I do like reading that, and then you get to this one question where it seems like there's okay, fine, I'll respond with something, which makes the last line in that quote make more sense.
So I actually have been thinking about Harrison Ford a lot lately. I guess just because the week before last I was in Chicago and it was cold, and just walking through some of the streets there, it's just like, oh, this looks like that shot in The Fugitive where he gets money from his friend who turns out to be not his friend. So I think he's an interesting guy because he's not really Hollywood, and I think the character that I think is like most like him, or what I would assume like how I would imagine him in real life, is his Linus from it's a remake. I'm trying to remember. It's got Julia Ormond and Greg Kinnear. Do you know the movie I'm talking about?
Not off the top of my head, but I feel like I should, and that's why I'm kind of racking my brain.
I'm sorry I can't remember. I'm not sure that this is really, the point of what we were, what you want to talk about here, but
so with the article, with the quote, I didn't know for sure where I wanted to go. So it all fits. Nothing's off the table. There's just something about that quote that hit me in a way that I didn't expect it to. And most of it is trying to figure out why. And so I guess I should read the quote just to be complete. And of course, as usual, the actual article will be linked in the show notes. There was the question, or the statement from the reporter was, one of your majors in college was philosophy. Has any of that stayed with you? And Harrison Ford's response was, yeah, there's a Protestant theologian named Paul Tillich who wrote that if you have trouble with the word God, take whatever is central and most meaningful to your life and call that God. My mother was Jewish, my father was Catholic, and I was raised Democrat. My moral purpose was being a Democrat with the big D, but it didn't apply to a political point of view so much as it applied to nature. I didn't have any religious construct, but I think nature and God are the same thing. The mysterious origin of life. Science tells us how it happened. Prophecy tells us another story. I found that everything in nature, the complexity, the biodiversity, the symbiotic relationships, is the same thing other people attribute to God. Now, aren't you glad you asked that question? You want to get back to the funny shit? And there's a lot there that it's interesting in a number of different ways. Before we even delve into that part, I encourage anybody listening to read the article, because it is an entertaining read in and of itself. And then the quote makes a bit more sense in context. But there's a very strong similarity to the way I've described Taoist Christianity as a label before, where there's a recognition that something is different, or a feeling or faith that there's something that is unexplainable, without the reliance on having to attach a label to it, or more of a willingness to accept that something unexplainable would give it a label for the sake of being able to try to reference it. Does that make sense?
I think so, because I've sort of moved into a place where the question, do you believe in God, is not really relevant to me. Like, it's much like the question, did you get the vaccine? It's my own personal business. And I like the comparison. Well, so I love the idea of whatever the thing that's most important to your life is your God. I think that speaks a lot of volumes. And I don't, in my day in the church, that would have been interpreted to mean that you have idols in your life, or that's often how that kind of remark was used. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's what he's meaning.
No, I very much feel like it's more, I believe that something exists that has an influence that I don't know what it is. And if you want to call it God, call it God. If you want to call it nature, call it nature. If you want to attach a different label, attach a different label. The whole point is that this thing that I believe exists isn't something I can explain.
Yeah, I really appreciate the number of the sentiments there.
And on the flip side of it, and this is part of why I equated it to the construct that I often have referred to as a Taoist-style Christianity. For me personally, I know I've stated it before, but just to recap, looking at all the major religions, they all have the same general vein of principles and teachings. There are obviously some variations, but in a nutshell, you get to a teaching of basically treating others in some positive fashion, having empathy for other people, sharing those experiences, etc. The trick here, and the Taoist quote-unquote part, is I might be right, I might be wrong. It's what I call it isn't the important thing. It's acknowledging that this thing exists. We can call it whatever name you want to call it. The reason it's been described the way I've used it as Taoist Christianity is because you're using Christian labels to describe that thing. And so that's the piecing together of this idea or mindset from a Taoist point of view of something existing. I believe something exists, or I have faith that something exists because of certain things that are unexplainable to me in my mind, or the sheer number of coincidental things I ascribe to some other thing. But what that thing isn't the important part of this whole thing. It's the acknowledgement of this thing, not how you talk about it or how you put labels on it. It's just this thing itself. And that is how I took his interpretation of, if you have trouble with the word God, use nature as an example type thing. Because the way he phrased it was the symbiotic relationships and all these other things, what people often describe as a facet of a belief in a deity is what could also be viewed as a facet of nature. And so trying to hone in on it has to be this belief is really looking at it the wrong way. I guess a long-winded way of putting it.
Yeah, it makes me think, and it makes me think about a concept that I came across in the last year or two about top-down and bottom-up religion. That being top-down religion is something that really I find bothersome, or troubling. Not necessarily bothersome, but I find that it's troubling. And the idea that top-down religion is what we've come to know as religion in the West, and that is like there is a supreme authority who is at the top of us, some sort of hierarchy, and all law and order flows through that being, is controlled by that being. He's sort of an arbiter of all truth and reality. And we have to, or maybe subjects is, I don't know if subjects is the right word or not, but it feels appropriate. The subject or the offspring or the flock, whatever, they have to obey those rules. Why? Because he made them. That's what, this, you get into this circular logic of they're good because God made them, and because God made them, they're good, that kind of sort of thing. And then there's what seems actually quite attractive to me is the idea of a bottom-up religion that centers on personal authority and one's own relationship with the transcendent. And so there's a constant practice of making one gradually more skilled and perceptive of their religious beliefs through training.
It's interesting. There are two. I don't necessarily want to make an additional religion conversation, but it feels like we're kind of steering that way finally.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear the description, because one of the fascinating things to me is how wrong people have gotten the idea, and how do I even phrase it? How wrong the church has created a perception of exactly that of itself and of what is taught via interpretation. Because the top-down thing, you can see it as far as a way that has come to be the predominant method of saying, well, of course you have to do it because this is what it says to do.
Right.
But the fascinating thing is that if you actually read the book and you actually understand the teachings, it's all about personal choice. And it's a hope that you will choose these things that are, quote unquote, proper or good or in accordance with the decrees, if you will. But it very clearly states no one is capable of being perfect or doing things without any level of sin or anything else, using the same terminology. That's the whole point. Like everything is, okay, you might be a horrible person and you might decide you want to be a better person. This has, this book, this sets of teachings have information to help guide you to change if you are wanting to change. That's really what it is. And what instead it has been presented to everybody as is, this book says what you have to do, and there is no questioning anything about it. And if you don't do exactly what this book says, you're going to burn forever in hell. And that it's wrong.
Yeah, but, they justify their interpretation of that by other things that are written in the Bible, and I it like I kind of actually felt like I didn't like the use of the word wrong as far as like the church, like in the sense of like this is how. Let's just talk about the Protestant church because that's at best what we know, or that's what's most prominent in our world geographically, in our geographic locations. It's what I understand the most. I don't know a lot about Catholicism, but probably more than most of the Baptists that I know. And
probably more than most average Catholics.
I don't know.
Sorry, I had to.
I'm not entirely sure about that, but not by much. Now that I'm derailed, I did remember the name of the movie that I was trying to reference for Harrison Ford, and that was the movie Sabrina. But I won't stay there. I want to keep going on this thing that I'm talking about. I think it's been I feel looking from the outside that it's pretty obvious that this is what they've done to maintain control. You create, if you have, I think sin is a religious construct used to control people into behaving a certain way. And I can remember Ricky Gervais being famously asked by someone, well, if you don't have a God, then what keeps you from doing all, raping and murdering? And his response was, I do all the raping and murdering I want, which is none. And it's like, I don't need a God to tell me that that's wrong. So, I don't like what the Christian God, how he's been presented. If there is a God, because I've never believed that there's, I've never claimed that there's no God. I just don't feel convinced that there is a God. But I also, the thing that throws a wrench in my thinking is the idea of parallel universes, because if there are parallel universes, yes, there is a God. The exact Christian God that you describe in the Protestant Bible exists in some parallel universe. But then there's a paradox there, because somehow that God would have to be outside of the specific universe, because that God is, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient.
And you create another paradox by saying that there has to also be a parallel universe where that God could not exist in any way, shape, fashion, or form, which would also contradict the fact that it would exist.
Right.
Another one.
Yeah. So there's when you get to things that are absolutes, then you start creating paradoxes.
Right.
Is that right?
Yes.
I'm off topic a bit.
I don't actually know if it requires it being an absolute or not to be paradoxical, or if an absolute could exist that is not paradoxical. That would take.
That's the thing I need to start talking about. I need to say that to Christians more. How does your God not create how do you not understand the paradox that your God creates? Something like that. I'll have to workshop it.
I think you can come up with something fun there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, wrong may not have been the correct word, but it's not
I think it's wrong morally. To control people in that way, I think that's wrong morally. Not.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I was getting at is that there's been an interpretation that has been taught consistently and repeatedly, and in the majority of organizations and agencies and facilities, that does not match what is actually taught if you take the time to read the teaching.
Yeah, well, I think also there's, to your benefit, you can say, if somebody says, well, what about this verse? And you're like, I don't have an answer for that, except for if you can pick and choose, text, then so can I.
I mean, yeah, you get into some odd nuances when you think about differences in translation based on understanding of language over time too. But I still don't think you get as much from that as you do. People love to take small chunks of any text and quote them to support a particular view, regardless of whether we're talking about religion or politics or anything else. And this is very much a realm where you cannot do that. You have to take the entirety of the text and understand what that text is attempting to explain in order to be able to understand what snippets actually mean.
Yeah.
And that's just not something that most...
No, it's not. Most people don't like to do that. Like they like to think... Most people like to find the thing that supports what they already believe.
Right.
But what you said, though, made me think of a thing... And I lost the thought. It'll come back, but it was a question oh, yes, I told you it would come back. It also made me think about like how much. I don't know if you've asked this to people, but like mainstream Christians, have you ever asked them if they know how much of what they think about what's in the Bible is actually from John Milton's Paradise Lost?
I have not asked that question.
It's a great question. Prepare yourself for things that are in Paradise Lost that are not in the Bible. You can get like half a dozen things, and that's always fun to be like, well, this is like some really key concepts that I thought were from the Bible that were actually from Paradise Lost were kind of surprising to me.
I'm going to have to go back, and it's been, I don't know how long since I read Paradise Lost. I'm going to have to go back and refamiliarize myself with the text there to be able to even come up with anything. But it's the same kind of thing that if you ask people, what do you think the Bible says about something, it doesn't typically line up with what's actually written. It lines up with something that they've heard from either a quote with maybe a fleeting reference to something in the Bible, or someone teaching something based off of a different piece. For example, and I know we've mentioned it, but one of the things that has come up in the past has been, what does the Bible say about homosexuality? And it technically doesn't. Mm-mm. And you can make some arguments based on trying to interpret specific lines, but that's not what those lines are referring to. You have to take them in context with the entire passage.
Well, I think some of the lines have been like words were changed inappropriately, maybe dubiously. I'm not sure, but
well, it goes back to, you have to understand the phrasing at the time it was written as well. You can't just choose the word that it most closely translates to.
Right.
So the meaning of what was originally written is not necessarily the meaning of how you would interpret the translation if the translation was done for the word that most closely matches instead of the word that most closely matches the original meaning. Like there is nuance, and I will give a little bit of leeway that depending on how you understood what you were reading, I understand why we've reached a point where this happens.
Right.
My issue is that there are so few, we'll just say so few churches, it could be individuals or anything else, but we'll just say so few churches that attempt to correct that. Instead, most continue to perpetuate the same rubbish. That's my issue.
I'm not sure. I agree with that. And I'm not sure. I feel like anything else I would say would be derivative of what you've just said.
Yeah, I didn't give a good way to segue from that. I realized after I said it, which just makes the segue all the much more fun. And that's really the gist of the entire problem. And I don't know that we need to spend any other real time on that subset of it. I think it's I think we just take it back toward Harrison Ford and the article and just kind of talk about anything else with him that is of interest to round out the show.
Well, I'm impressed with, I'm impressed he's still, well, I find it aspirational that he's still working the way that he's working. He's almost, twice my age. So.
And he's still filming action movies.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's 3 he's working on, right?
So he's doing 2 TV shows and a movie at the moment, I believe.
So, Shrinking.
So the article actually, yes. So the article actually mentions that apparently prior to this, Harrison Ford had made the statement or was very open about he takes 1 project a year. And so he's doing 3 this year, which is very abnormal for him.
Yeah.
And the question was actually in the article, and his comment was basically along the lines of, look, I enjoy what I do, and over the past couple of years, I haven't been able to do as much of what I enjoy doing, so I'm doing more.
Yeah.
And in this, it also talks about him being very much just a working man from a sense of he never has tried to direct or produce or any of the other stuff. He's an actor. That's what he does. That's what he enjoys. That's what he wants to do. And that's what he does.
I love that they reference the movie The Mosquito Coast here. And it's just in the caption of the picture of him and Helen Mirren, who's in 1923 with him, which I'd like to watch because I've heard really good things about Yellowstone. So, well, I guess
I actually have Yellowstone on my list to watch still.
It looks good. I don't even know what it's about, but it looks good to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, have you seen The Mosquito Coast?
I have. I have not seen 1923, which is what it sounded like you were about to phrase before you caught yourself.
I probably was,
but I have seen The Mosquito Coast.
Yeah, that was a important movie for me as far as like shaping my views on religion. And I own that movie. I like that movie. I don't know if you noticed at the beginning it has Jason Alexander with a head full of hair.
I hadn't thought about it, but as soon as you mentioned it, yes.
Yeah, it was before a few years before Seinfeld. He's the hardware shop clerk and a very young River Phoenix. I was just gonna say, like, I recommend watching this movie, but I love the
it's one that I surprisingly don't have in my library. I should remedy that at some point.
Yeah, there's a Apple TV Plus show called The Mosquito Coast, and I don't know how related it is. I don't think it is.
The other thing that I thought I would mention, not necessarily with regard to the article, but I'm cautiously optimistic about the upcoming Indiana Jones.
Oh yeah.
One of the blurbs that is in the article that I read is that they talked about trying to make the action match the fact that you have an 80-year-old Harrison Ford. So instead of trying to pretend he's not older, actually embrace it and have that be an integral component of the storyline as well, or not necessarily something that you would focus on, but not avoid it. And I think if you have that approach going into it, it's bound to be decent, since you have the return of a number of other characters as well.
It can't be his dad.
No, it's and the whole reason I said other characters as well is because I was drawing blanks on names. So Raiders of the Lost Ark, the girl that had the medallion, I don't remember the character name.
I don't either, but she was in the last Indiana. She was in the Crystal Skull.
I don't remember enough about the Crystal Skull. I didn't enjoy the movie. I don't completely block it out. I never watched it more than the first time I watched it. I didn't enjoy anything about it enough to watch it again.
So it's not a lost world for you?
No.
Oh, well, okay. Okay.
Well, there was no previous source material for me to disavow.
Fair. I forget it's not just that it needs to be, yeah, okay.
And then the Egyptian guy, sidekick. God, why am I so horrible with names? Yes, but what's the character name?
Andy.
I mean, yes, we're talking about Davis, but what? It's gonna kill me that I cannot remember the character name.
I'm looking it up.
Anyway, both of them are apparently in the film.
That's I always like seeing John Rhys Davies in movies. His name was Salah.
Salah. I should have known that, and that's the whole reason it was bugging me. Since you have the page pulled up, what's the character name for the girl?
Marianne.
Okay.
Yeah, she's in the Crystal Skull. Salah was not in the Crystal Skull.
He was?
I don't remember. I was asking.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think he returned for that one. I'll have to watch the Crystal Skull again at some point. I don't know. I don't have a copy of it, which is also part of why I have probably never watched it.
It's on.
I assume Disney owns it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's on Disney Plus.
But either way, a combination of those things, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think it'll be a decent film.
Oh, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Yeah, I don't know. I'm always interested in. I'll watch it at least once.
Yeah, me too.
See, what every Indiana Jones movie really needs is, Indiana Jones, feeling the requirements of Lieutenant Aldo Rain. Give me 100 Nazi scalps.
There is one piece. So one of the villains is also returning. I don't remember which one. I didn't pay that much attention. But there is a line that they've shown in the trailer that is, my memory's... Harrison Ford delivers a line of something like, my memory's fuzzy. Are you still a Nazi?
That's cool. That'll be fun. But so, let's see. If Indiana Jones is 80 years old, wouldn't that put him into the 80s?
Yeah.
So is this going to be an 80s movie?
I believe so.
No way. I wonder if it's going to be I know this is never going to come up in the movie, but is this a world that recognizes that there's a movie called Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Yeah, I don't know.
You know what I mean? It'll never show up because that's not what they do.
Yeah. But it will be interesting to see whether they have any.
How
is
80s
it going
it'll
to be like real 80s, or is it going to be Indy's world 80s?
I think it's going to be real 80s, but in Indiana Jones way, in the sense that the 80s will, when watching this movie, it'll feel that the 80s part of it will feel subdued. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Did you ever watch *Halt and Catch Fire*?
It does not sound familiar.
It is the Mad Men equivalent of the personal computer in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, no. Not something I've watched.
I recommend it. It's a good show. But it's very 80s, but and actually it goes into the 90s. But it is it doesn't feel like, oh, this is like an 80s period piece. It feels like, oh, felt pretty accurate. So unlike Wonder Woman 1984.
I actually still haven't watched that.
I remember people liking the first Wonder Woman. I didn't watch that, and I'd like to at some point.
So I did watch the first one, and I did enjoy the first one.
So I knew a lot of people that enjoyed the first one and did not like the second one.
And I don't know why I haven't watched it at this point, actually. It hasn't been the priority choice.
It's not
good. That's the big thing.
It's not good. It's not even fun. Can we talk about one more set of Harrison Ford movies to round this out?
I think we should.
It's my bite.
I actually thought that's where the segue was going to go when I took us there, and then
I missed it. I totally
so
missed it.
I was kind of surprised.
I totally missed it. That was my bad. I came across. These are not my own original ideas, but I wanted to share them with you because I think you'll appreciate them. But I came across this why every Star Wars movie was misnamed, and it starts with Episode 1, as you know, seems logical. And in Episode 1, we're introduced to Anakin Skywalker, so that movie should have been called The Rise of Skywalker. In Episode 2, Palpatine, leader of the Sith, orders an army to destroy the Jedi. That should have been called Revenge of the Sith. Episode 3, Clones Attack, should have been called Attack of the Clones. Episode 4, Obi-Wan teaches Luke that it's time for the Jedi to return, and it could have been called Return of the Jedi. In Episode 5, Yoda teaches Luke how to use the Force Awakens. In 6, Yoda and Anakin die, and Luke is the last Jedi. In Episode 7, after the Empire has been destroyed, a new Empire is formed, and the Empire strikes back. In Episode 8, Luke trains Rey and sacrifices himself, giving the Resistance a new hope. In Episode 9, Palpatine returns from the dead, making him the Phantom Menace. I mean, those make more sense to me than the actual names.
I mean, I agree. But
right?
Here's the problem I have with it, though,
Yes.
is that it requires you to have the names thought of prior to when they were created.
I think it also requires that you know the story 1 through 9 instead of just, starting with 4 through 6, waiting 20-ish years and going down, 15 to 20 years and going down to 1 through 3 and then waiting another 15 years to do 7 through 9. Yeah, I get that. But Lucas knew this shit.
Well, people say that, but I don't know how much of it was actually true. I think he had ideas for 1 through 9, what to say. But I don't think it was that clear. I think it was he had ideas for what became 1 through 3 that maybe...
That's why this wasn't a book.
Were shorthand. And then he had really strong ideas for what he did with 4, 5, and 6, and had kind of loose ideas for how to follow it up as well. And I know for sure, based on interviews with him, that what his ideas were for what followed Return of the Jedi do not match with what was created.
He probably wanted more Ewoks.
There's no telling what he wanted based on what he did with 1 through 3. And the fact that he fucked up the Han and Greedo scene in A New Hope anyway.
I don't even like calling it A New Hope. Well, I guess A New Hope is where Han doesn't shoot first, and Star Wars is where Han shoots first. I mean, that's actually how it is.
Yeah, you can absolutely make that distinction. But I mean, I think he was flying more by the seat of his pants than people like to give him credit for. I think he had a really strong narrative in his mind for what became episodes 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
And I think he had ideas for how to expand it in either direction outside of that.
See, based on what occurs in the non-4, 5, and 6 movies, it's clear. It feels pretty clear to me. This is the closest thing I can make right now, starting with A New Hope.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd be willing to accept the argument that he had really strong feelings about what became 1, 2, and 3, and didn't feel like he could make it based on budget.
Yeah. Because at that time, the budget would have required a lot of animatronics.
Yeah.
But it feels, which makes it feel like how much did it change in the 20, the 15 to 20 year gaps?
Oh, I'm sure it grew exponentially in scale. Because you look at 4, 5, and 6, and it's a very intimate story. And you have much grander scales of storytelling in 1, 2, and 3. And I think that once he realized he could actually do 1, 2, and 3, instead of picking more intimate storylines, he tried to do the big. It's not geopolitical when you're talking about planetary scales, is it? Or is it still geopolitical?
It's still stellar political.
Yeah, massively larger settings. But I think his original ideas were not as grandiose in scale and probably would have been better films.
Yeah, I think so. It's one of those things where, like, the improvements I see upon the most recent Star Wars movies were sets and locations. Those were excellent. Having more aliens doesn't really. I get the problem with it, and we talked about vampire movies last show. I really like alien movies, and I really like alien movies. So, but what I was going to say was that it doesn't. The problem with the aliens is that the aliens just look like humans with stuff. And I'm like okay with other humanoid races. Like in Star Trek, you've got the whatever Worf is. He's a Klingon. Yeah, and you've got the which look less
Romulans.
Yes, they look less human than the Romulans, and the Romulans are more or less indistinguishable by humans from external visual perception, and so that makes it easier to accept that they're aliens, whereas the wacky aliens in Star Wars are just it's a human but stuff rearranged, some more so than others. But then it makes me feel like to say that about Star Trek is there some underlying context of racism because there are only humanoid type species that are important in the show or exist. Did we wipe out all the non-humanoid looking ones? I'm grasping at straws here.
Yeah, I'm as far as the Star Trek universe goes, I'm familiar enough with the predominantly mainstream, the original Star Trek, the Next Generation, Star Trek Enterprise. I didn't watch a lot of the ancillary shows, so any of the Deep Space, whatever.
Deep Space Nine.
I don't even remember the other ones.
Deep Space Nine with Jerry Ryan.
And whichever one it was that had Captain Jane, whatever.
Couldn't tell you.
I don't know the series.
Couldn't tell you. I don't even know. I didn't even know much about Spock. I only know Spock about from the movies, the old, new, and new movies.
And then I've watched season 1 of Picard, which is actually really good, by the way.
So I know Star Trek: The Next Generation a bit better from the movies. The show I just couldn't get into because I was too young, I think. But Picard is why am I blanking on? I'm blanking on everything right now, but I'm blanking on the actor's name. Patrick Stewart.
Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, fabulous actor, really cool dude. It seems, and I can imagine that Picard is really good.
Very similarly, Picard embraced Patrick Stewart's age for the character, which to me that really helps a lot. But either way, where I was going with my statement is that because I don't know the entire Star Trek universe overly well, non-humanoid aliens might be portrayed somewhere else in that universe.
They were in the first movie that J.J. Abrams did. I think they're on a planet and there's some ice beast trying to eat people.
I do remember that. It
felt very Star Wars. It felt very Star Wars.
It's when Hoth. Kirk was ejected onto a planet.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I remember.
It's when new Spock meets old Spock.
Yeah. So there is an element of that that's been embraced. Generally speaking, Star Wars tried to be more diverse, and I think part of where it fell flat is how many different types of aliens can you create that are not CGI. Because I do think the prequels attempted to do more with regard to differentiation in types of aliens portrayed. But when you rely on practical effects and having to build things, it's easier from a costuming perspective to have people still be more or less humanoid.
I know, and that's what just I don't want to say like it's I don't want to say that it's wrong. It's like his movie; he can do whatever he wants. It just feels it takes me out of it. Yeah. Most of the alien movies that I really like are, and I wouldn't call those alien movies, but where the alien is hostile and or malicious.
I do, in thinking about it, I think there's more variety in Star Wars than you notice at first.
No, that's what I was saying. There's a lot of variety, but they all are some variation of a human.
Well, that's where I was going with it. They're not actually. A lot of the non-humanoid variants just don't take center stage. Like you can pick them out in a scene here and there where they add to. I mean, think about Jabba the Hutt from the original trilogy for sure as a prime in-your-face example. But if you go to the most recent movies, the animals that were running around the track in which one was that one? Was that 8 or 9? Either way, when they had to go find the I'm going to call it a slicer. I don't remember what they referred to him as, but that would have been the last one. Either way, the animals that were bred for racing and running around the track, those were obviously alien beasts of some sort. Every time you see anything on Tatooine, you've got the bantha, and you've got what you'd have to rope in the Mandalorian for some of the other stuff too.
Yeah,
but
I think the bantha is like so it's definitely not a humanoid derivative, but it's certainly
it's a known animal derivative, right, for sure.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah. So whereas like Watto from the Phantom Menace, I think his name is Watto, the one who owned Anakin, or where Anakin worked for him. I don't know that they actually made that connection that he owned him or whatever, but like I'd consider him a human. Like he's derivative of a human because he's got a face. He's got a lot of different things that you never see on a human, but he's more or less, I'd consider him a derivative of a human. I would consider Jabba the Hutt a derivative of a human, whereas the Sarlacc is not I would say is not a derivative of a human or much of anything we know except for maybe like some type of jellyfish.
That's a massive worm.
Is it a worm? I don't remember ever seeing it out of its hole. Except for did they do it in the newest movies?
I don't think it was in the newest movies, but there was, and I think it was the special edition, the edits, where they had one where maybe it didn't come out.
I remember from the game the Super Nintendo game Super Star Wars, it does come out.
But I mean, the asteroid where the giant worm was living in a crater that swallowed the Millennium Falcon. And the Minox, which are basically bats with big suction cup faces.
None of it is. We are limited to what we know. Like I'm trying to, like what is the most alien of aliens? I don't know, but they're all derivatives. I can't think of anything that's not a derivative of something here, because everything we know is based on, we're carbon lifestyles that require water, carbon-based life forms that require water. Is that the end of the show?
Probably. The only reason I was pausing was because I was trying to think of anything that wouldn't. It feels reductive to describe it that way, but I get what you're going for. Like, you don't have some odd blob creature, for example, that can morph into some different shapes depending on how it needs to interact.
We got that in Terminator 2, though.
Right. But everything else, though, like, I would argue that the alien from Aliens is very derivative of a humanoid creature.
I would totally agree with that. I was going to say something about the alien from Aliens, but no, it's absolutely a human. They even did that for the Alien 3 when they were like, oh, this one came from a dog and it was more, quadruped than biped.
Well, and that's where, like, part of it was, I was just racking my brain real quick for, have I ever seen anything that I would say breaks the mold and is not derivative of something we know? And I'm drawing a blank.
Right. And I kind of got that idea from something Neil deGrasse Tyson said in the Universe. And he was talking about imagining, our life forms are based on, we're carbon-based life forms that rely on water, that require water. And he had mentioned, like, well, what if there was a life form that required, and I can't remember what liquid something it is in, maybe Saturn, which is like maybe methane. It might have been methane. Let's say methane took the place of water, and it's just like, that would be like, I don't think we could imagine what that creature would look like. I don't think we have the ability to think that way. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.